Welcome back to the Cold War. Shut the fuck up. I'm talking. Doing the intro.
Sorry.
This is episode 286.
Yes.
How are you, buddy?
I'm doing okay.
Let's get back to this because we got a long show. I have
Wait.
so many. I don't know if you probably don't because you don't do any research, but
Thank
it
you.
gets to a point when researching these shows
Right.
where I'm so deep into it.
Yeah.
The night before, for people
Yeah.
who don't know, we record at 8:30 in the morning my time, so I'll be up at like 11 o'clock at night as I was last night. And I'm like, I just need to close the fucking books.
Right.
I could keep
'Cause
going
you
on this.
Keep finding stuff.
Yeah, I keep finding stuff. I keep
Yeah.
drilling down on stuff. It's so fascinating to me, this whole this story,
Mm-hmm.
that I just need to stop. This is ridiculous,
Yeah.
you know.
Here's how I think of
We'll
it.
be here all day.
Exactly. Here's how I think of it, and I think a lot of people do as well. Rabbits call it, "Hey, did you go down a cam hole?" I mean, it's become its own thing. So, what should have been a 30-minute show is now an hour and a half. The cam hole.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. I went down a cam hole last night. Anyway, here's a cam.
Yeah.
So let's go down the cam hole.
So in our last episode, just to remind people,
Yes.
we talked about 1917. We talked about the US got involved again. They'd installed a bunch of US companies in Cuba. Sort of a bit of a political crisis goes on. They
Yeah.
send in the US Marines again in 1917 to protect US interests
Thank
because
you.
there were riots going on over corrupt elections.
Mm-hmm.
And the president at the time is Menocal. And Menocal, corrupt guy,
A little
but loved by the Americans because he's trying to do his best to protect American interests in the
Yes.
region. Spanish heritage, white guy. He had rigged the elections. He's on the conservative side of things. The liberals over there, which were at the time the sort of more progressive political party, took up an armed revolt. Now, Menocal was able to defeat them basically by using the same sort of extremely repressive measures that Cuba had inherited from the Spanish. Basically just went in and crushed the
Yeah.
political riots. Gomez, the leader of the liberals, another former general of the independence wars,
Mm-hmm.
was captured and imprisoned, but released later on with other leaders of the rebellion.
Yeah. But I think you'll find it cools down a revolution when you put the leaders in jail, maybe a couple of months, and then you kill a lot of their followers. By the time you let them out of jail, you're like, okay, you're free to go. Pretty effective in the short term because there's no one for them to lead anymore. They're all dead.
Yeah. Now, when the next election happened in November of 1920, Menocal invited Crowder, Enoch Herbert, aka Bert Crowder,
Right.
back to Cuba, back to Havana. Remember, he was the guy the Americans sent over to try and figure out an electoral system when they were forced to allow Cuba to be a democracy and not become a state like Canada
Right.
or Greenland.
And he was, like you said last time, he was the Judge Advocate General of the United States Army, and he did write a lot of the election laws. So you bring that guy back in, maybe he can tweak it and make it even better. So bring on the Crowder. They bring him back.
And to make it even better, it's to set it up in a way that people are going to vote for the right people,
Right.
and not for the wrong people.
Exactly. Yes.
And Menocal has used up his 2 terms now that he's limited to by the Constitution, again, sort of written by the Americans mostly.
Right.
And in this next election, Alfredo Zayas ran against Gomez, and Zayas was declared the winner.
Right.
Now, he had been a prosecutor, a judge, mayor of Havana, secretary of the Constitutional Convention, a senator,
Wow.
president of the Senate, vice president of Cuba from 1909 to 1913. He was a brother to Dr. Juan Bruno de Zayas,
Right.
one of the revolutionary heroes who died in the war, and Dr. Francisco de Zayas, who was a long-term sort of minister to Paris and Brussels. Zayas, the guy who becomes president, wasn't a war hero. He was an intellectual. I mean, he had been active during the war. He wasn't a military leader, I
Right,
guess. But
right.
during the Cuban War of Independence, he was a intellectual guy talking about, why they should have independence
The
from the
ideas.
oligarchy of Spain, all that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
And he was arrested and sent to prison, in Africa.
Ooh,
Like, you know,
yeah.
if the Americans want to get you out of the way, they'll send you to, well, it used to be Guantanamo Bay, now it's El Salvador.
Right,
The Spanish would send them to Africa. It was a
right.
place called Ceuta, actually. It was a Spanish enclave near Morocco on the coast.
Hmm.
They'd send you there to really, so you're off the map.
Yes.
Imagine in those days, like in the late 1800s, you're sent to a prison colony, basically.
Take weeks to
It's
get there.
going to take you
Yeah,
3 months
yeah.
on a boat to get there in the first place. Like
It-
that's
And it's not a Disney cruise. I mean, you're already a prisoner. I mean, and they don't give a shit about any rights. Not that you have any. I mean, that's how you mess with the opposition. You literally make their lives unbearable.
But he had been a very he obviously got out eventually, but he was released. But he was a very vocal leader of the opposition
Hmm.
against the U.S. annexation of Cuba. He led the vote against the Platt Amendment
Wow.
and against granting naval bases to the United States in Guantanamo. But then from 1906 to 1908, he had been one of the 6 Cuban lawyers on the advisory law commission that Crowder set up to serve as the provisional government of Cuba.
Hmm.
He had also been the leader of the Liberal Party during the 1916 election, but then ran for president, lost. I said that there was this, the rioting that the Marines came in to shut down.
Yeah.
And when they lost, he lost kind of all political authority in the party. The party split. And by 1920, he had switched sides,
Ooh.
at least tactically, and was backed by the Conservatives. He was I think he was sort of seen as a sort of a bridge candidate, somebody
Mhm.
that was probably acceptable.
Yeah.
He had been the leader of the Liberal Party, the more progressive party. He was against the U.S. occupation. Now he's with the Conservatives, who are kind of pro the U.S. occupation, but he's sort of sitting somewhere there. So he's a weird candidate. But of course, when he gets elected, his old party again accuses the government of electoral fraud, that it had been rigged. Again, they called for U.S. intervention.
Right.
This is the bizarre thing. Like the party that is primarily the progressive party that's against U.S. intervention,
So, hey,
when the elections don't go their way, they call for U.S. intervention.
I don't like you, but you are the power that be. So could you come and give me a ruling on this? And President Wilson is going to send Crowder back, and he investigates and finds out, yeah, there was some hooey palooey, whatever the term you want to use. There was some fraud, there was some corruption going on. But when is there not? I mean, this is Cuba in the early days. It's going to happen. But still, I mean, it's not going to change. Is it going to change anything? I don't know.
Well, no, but he arrives on an American battleship.
That
the
helps.
Minnesota,
That helps.
literally gunboat diplomacy, as we have talked about many times.
Big
You
gunboat.
send in a gunboat,
Right.
big gunboat, yeah. This one, unlike the one that got blown up during the beginning of the Spanish-American War, does not. But it sits in Havana Harbor while he remains in negotiations with
Right.
both sides. And they decide there will be a new round of elections in March of 21 in some provinces where
Ooh.
there had been fraud.
Right.
And this time, the Liberals didn't even participate. They just figured there was no chance of
Right.
there being an election that was free from fraud, so they basically stayed out of it.
Right. So why even bother? Yeah.
Yeah. Gomez, the leader of the Liberals, went to Washington
Damn right.
to appeal to the new American president,
Mm-hmm.
Walter Harding, but Harding wasn't interested. And Gomez actually died while in New York
Right.
in June
Yeah.
of 1921.
But could
And
have been.
Zayas became president in May of 1921. But he inherited a whole bunch of problems,
Yeah.
and a lot of them had to do with the Cuban economy. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of political unrest, but the Cuban economy had imploded at the end of World War One because why, Ray?
Yeah, well, during the last year of the war, wars make things uncertain. So they fixed the price of sugar for the last year of the war. It might not be what you want, but at least you have stability. But after that, the price is removed. The price of sugar goes up to 20 cents in May of 1920. Things are pretty good. Things are, that they can make some money off that. But then, for whatever reason, and if you have the details on this, please let me know. By November of that year, the price of sugar goes down to 4 cents. I mean, to go from 20 cents to 4 cents, I don't know much about stocks, but I know that's bad. Okay. So just like, boom, just like that, the Cuban economy is wrecked. The National Bank is closed in April of 1921. The controlling shareholder, and I love the name, Juan Manuel Casanova, the president of Banco Mercantil y Mercado, one of the major Cuban banks, obviously crashes, it fails. Now, the book that I read, because, and I want your opinion on this too, it says he was found hanged on the balcony of his apartment versus saying he had hung himself on the balcony of his apartment. So I'm going to stop there, but the price of sugar drops. And since Cuba's economy is pretty much based on this, I mean, lives are ruined. If there were any savings, that's ruined. But then this major, power player, rich guy who was on top of the world, one day is now dangling from a rope. The next, I don't know if there was any foul play, but if you know of anything, I would keenly like to hear about it. Or did he just I can't be poor? And I understand that I can't be poor. I would rather be dead than poor, I think is what he was thinking.
This reminds me of the most recent season of White Lotus. One of the plot lines in it is this super rich family
Right.
that are in Thailand at this resort. And when they arrive, the father finds out, he gets a phone call and finds out that a guy that he's in business with has got the FBI in his offices, and they found out about all this corrupt shit that he was doing. And this guy is going to lose, the guy that's in Thailand with his family is going to lose everything. They're going to go back and he's going to lose his fortune, lose his reputation.
Right.
He's got 3 rich, spoiled kids. His wife's rich and spoiled.
Right.
And he doesn't tell them, and he's trying to
Yeah.
at some point, he's like, money isn't everything. And his wife
Yeah.
is
Testing her.
like, you know what? I couldn't be poor. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be poor again. I couldn't go back to being poor. I know it sounds terrible, but I just couldn't be poor.
That's who
Then he
I
has all
am.
these fantasies.
Yeah.
He has all these fantasies about killing his family and killing himself, and
Right.
so to save them
there.
all from the embarrassment of being poor again.
Right. Because the last thing you want is your daughter to go, Father, are we poor? I mean, no parent wants to. Anyway, please go ahead.
Fox just knows we're poor. My kids have all grown up knowing that I'm poor. Daddy's, so my dad is a podcaster. He's poor.
My kids have embraced it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the story around the sugar thing is interesting. So just to remind people,
Yeah.
before World War One, a lot of the world, including the United Kingdom and lots of Europe, got their sugar from sugar beets.
Right.
And the sugar beets mostly came from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the war broke out, they couldn't get sugar beets from Germany. They couldn't get sugar. And so they had to get sugar from sugarcane. And
Right.
the crop, the people that were growing sugarcane, including Australia, by the way, a lot of sugarcane, my hometown. I never took you to my hometown when you came here, but
Right.
my hometown, Bundaberg, is the center of Australian sugar. It's nearly, it's 90% sugarcane fields. It used to be.
Yeah.
They've diversified a bit more now, but sugarcane everywhere. It's a subtropical climate.
Right.
So sugar had to come from places like that, and they did put a limit on the price so people could afford sugar.
Right.
Otherwise, the sugar price would have completely boomed. When the war ended, the sugar price, as you said, went from 4 cents where it was during the war and before the war, up to about 20 cents.
Wow.
And what happens then? It was a bubble. It was a sugar bubble
Right.
in Cuba.
Right.
And because I've been doing this investing show for the last 6 years or so, I think a lot about bubbles and how people get swept up in the hype of bubbles. And this was a huge bubble.
Right.
So what happens in bubbles when there's a bubble like that? I got to stop saying bubble. I'm obsessed
No,
now with saying bubble.
you go.
When there's bubbles, when there's a lot of money to be made out of something, whether it's sugar or it's AI or it's whatever the tech stocks are,
Born. Yeah.
obviously a lot of people are greedy. They see an opportunity and they will go and borrow a shit ton of money
Oh shit.
to invest into this market because there's a shit ton of money to be made. And that's what had happened in Cuba. So
Right.
a lot of sugar plantations in Cuba in this couple of years after the war ended,
Mm.
when the price was super high, went and borrowed tons and tons of money from American banks, some Cuban banks, but also and the Cuban banks got their money from American banks.
Right.
They to invest in more sugar plantations and more sugar mills because the price is up and there's shit tons of money to be made.
Right.
When the price crashed again, as the sugar beets came back online,
Right.
the sugar beet factories were rebuilt, the sugar beet fields were producing sugar beets again. It doesn't last forever,
A
right?
glut.
Bubbles never last forever.
That's why they're a bubble.
The price, yes,
Yeah.
the price popped.
Right.
And people were ruined. In the middle of 1920, when it collapsed, all of the mill owners that had borrowed against the price of sugar just months earlier
Right.
found themselves bankrupt. Sugar mills defaulted on their loans. Then the banks started failing. 20 Cuban banks with 334 branches closed.
Right.
American banks, which had the backing of their parent companies in the United States, survived. In fact, they flourished because the Cuban banks were all shutting down. People had to put their money somewhere. They put them with the American banks.
Right.
And as all of these businesses are going bankrupt, who's picking them up? American banks.
Getting them on the cheap. Right.
Yeah. American banks and American investors that can get money from American banks just grabbing up all of the stuff that they didn't already own, which was most of it. We talked in the previous episodes about
Right.
the economic crisis that had been created when the Spanish left, and how the Americans were able to go and write the legislation and figure out the economy in a way that they could already nearly buy everything. There were some rich Spanish and some rich Cubans still in Cuba that managed to own stuff, but now they're losing all of that because of this new economic crisis.
Right.
1/4 of Cuban sugar mills passed to New York City's bank, or the Citibank, I think it was called New York's City Bank.
Right.
And by 1922, 2/3 of the sugar harvest was produced by US owned or US controlled companies.
Right. So that gives what we said a couple of minutes ago, when the Marines go in to protect American interests, it's not just a couple of mills. It's a whole bunch of mills. It's now banks. It's whatever else they're diversifying into. I mean, Americans own a good chunk of Cuba. So yeah, you send the Marines down to protect that. But again, don't just think of a couple of sugar mills. Think of, just layers and layers all over the island. And they're only going to get more as time goes on, because and I know you know this better than I do, once you have money, it's so much easier to make more money because you have the resources to invest, and they're just going to keep expanding as much as they can.
Yeah, and so Cuba found themselves in desperate need of American financial assistance.
Right.
Now, Zayas, as I said before, who's now the head of the government, was anti-American intervention in Cuba.
Yeah.
Not the best guy to be running the government when you're in desperate need of American financial assistance.
And so for this leader who does not like America, there is one saving grace. It's America, but he'd rather not. But, desperate times, desperate measures.
Yeah, so Zayas's new government approached several US banks and they demanded severe conditions for bailing out the Cuban economy, which had to be guaranteed by Crowder staying in Havana to make sure that Cuba did what Cuba was supposed to do.
I hope he likes it
And
there. Yeah.
they wanted Crowder to basically do what the World Bank and the IMF has been doing for the last however many years,
Mm-hmm.
is restructure the Cuban economy.
Right.
So he now is not only the constitutional expert and designing the electoral system for
Right.
Cuba, he's now the finance expert and designing how their economy is going to work.
I can do it all.
So
Yeah.
they did get a loan in 1922, but they had to cut costs and crack down on all sorts of public spending and those sorts of things. And Crowder now is made the U.S. ambassador to
Yeah.
Cuba.
I think what you're trying to say is that Crowder elongated. He cut budgets. He looked at contracts. Future projects had to be run by Congress, which was something that the Americans did. So he elongated. He went in there and he just cut, because, like you said, the banks are like, yeah, we'll give you money, but there are certain things we wanted. We want you to be a lot leaner and meaner. And of course, as we know, most of the time when government projects are cut, it's the less well off that suffer the most. And that's another thing that's going on. And they've already lost their jobs in the first place.
And fought a civil war and ended up with fuck all out of it. And
exactly.
All this kind of stuff.
Fuck.
So by 1921, the US had got back into a situation where they were effectively running Cuba again.
Right.
They'd had to agree to let them have elections, but now it's become a complete clusterfuck, and the US are running the political system and the economic system. They already had, had the Platt Amendment that said that they could intervene militarily whenever they deemed it was in their interest to do so.
Yeah.
So basically, the Cuba is now a US colony in all but name by 1921. There were more elections in 1924, still full of violence and fraud, but the Liberals won their first victory since 1909, and the new president. So this is supposed to be the Progressive Party, the good guys.
The good guys won finally. Yes.
And the new president is Gerardo Machado. Now, it turned out that he was not a good guy. Machado,
right,
was very popular to begin with, but turned out to be a classic Cordillo, Latin American strongman. Trump would have loved him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They would have shaken hands firmly and love fest. But the thing was, and I'm sure we'll go into this, but Machado was wise. I mean, he was a good politician. He wasn't an economist. He did know how to sit the fence, if you will. He sat on the fence. The liberals got along with him. The army got along with him. The police got along with him. The business community. But most importantly, the United States, either now or is very quickly going to think good things of him. So he was all things to all people, except for he was hollow. And as we're going to see, when it comes, and this is the test of any true leader, when things get tough, how do you handle it? There's handling problems with grace, and then there's just shooting the fuck out of it. And we'll see which one he succumbs to.
Yeah. He was, the word macho comes from Machado. It was his nickname. He was a macho man. I want to be a macho man.
I learned so
much. That was
much.
His political campaign. Yeah. That song, people don't know that, but
macho
man.
Yeah.
I want to be a macho man.
Yeah.
Macho man. That was his campaign.
Yes.
He wrote it himself.
Yeah, he sat there with a pen and a Macho. Yes. Oh, the women are going to love it. Gold chain, hairy chest.
Yeah. People were walking around Havana with a badge saying, I want to be a macho man. It wasn't as disco as the Village People's version. They just did a cover of it.
Right.
They discoed it up a little bit.
They
but
looked in history books.
It was had more of a Cuban feel. It was more like...
there you go, baby.
Fucking... What was that Cuban album that was big
Shuffle.
30 years ago? The documentary... Buena Vista Social Club.
Oh.
Chan Chan. Oh, fucking love that. There's a great film, 1999 documentary by Wim Wenders. Yeah, it was more of a Latin American.
Right,
Hey,
right.
yippee, you
Still.
macho man. I don't know what I'm doing there.
And-
Okay. Um, so Macho Man gets elected, and he's well liked by the Americans.
Good.
The
Check.
country is still in a financial crisis, though, by 1924.
Yeah.
And he basically is a puppet leader for the American interests.
Yes.
He turns the government into an authoritarian dictatorship
Right.
well beyond what they had seen
Right.
before.
Could I just
a
add?
communist?
Sorry.
Mm,
I just want to add something because this is important. I looked this. I found this on I can't remember where I found it, but one of the many reasons that people quickly become disillusioned with him, because when he ran for the election in 1924 and won, his campaign had been water,